Welcome to this week's edition of Money Matters. And as you know, I deeply believe that money does matter, which is why I get so animated when people start stealing money off people. In this week's edition of Money Matters, I want to focus on a Ponzi scheme. And it is so large, it is so blatant, it is so ridiculous that every single one of us gives our tacit or indeed our explicit approval to it carrying on. My name is Paul Smith, Touchstone Education. I've been a property investor, wealth, money, tax, business, structure for 42 years now. Ponzi schemes are based on fraudulent investment management services. They promise returns to investors higher than traditional forms of investment by paying returns to the current investors from the old investors. So there is no actual commercial activity. The very first Ponzi scheme was for a trivial £15 million, and that's from Mr. Ponzi himself all the way back in the 1920s, right the way through to 2008 when the notorious Mr. Bernie Madoff got busted and he got sentenced to something like 150 years in prison. But to be fair, he had lifted £20 billion worth of other people's money. And I think what upset the investment institutions even more, he used to be chairman or some senior person in the New York Stock Exchange. I now want to share with you a government document. Didn't see that twist coming, did you? Or maybe you did if you know me well enough. And this is something called the whole government accounts for the year ended 31st March 2021. Why is it so far out of date? That's more than 2 years out of date. It's because they collate central government accounts, local government accounts, and it's more than half the population work for the central work for government of one form or another. So the income, 730 billion. Why have they got brackets around it? Well, because they don't actually earn anything. When was the last time that government actually earned any money? So their income is their word for our tax. Income tax, VAT, taxes on capital appreciation, death duty. So they've got 730 billion pounds of our money. What do they do with that? They spend all of it plus another 330 billion. So their expenditure was over £1 trillion. And by the way, the GDP, the output of the whole of the UK is around about £1 trillion. They're spending roughly the entire country's GDP per year. Over the years, they've built up what they describe as assets of 2.2 trillion and liabilities, so money they owe to other people, whether that be bondholders, whoever it is, they owe money of 5.5 trillion. Expenditure 40% higher than income and liabilities 2.5 times your assets. So what is the single simple reason? It's they can print money. No other institution on the planet can do that. It's just government. If they want to spend an extra 300-400 million, they can just print it. Let's have a look at income. So the income tax, 190 billion. National insurance, 125 billion. Did you know that national insurance is roughly 2/3 of the income tax take? VAT, 122. It's again, these are the big three, aren't they? Other central government tax. Now this is pretty much everything else lumped together. Corporation tax on companies, this is dividend tax, this is capital gains tax, this is death duties, this is literally everything else put together. So you got 4 big numbers. Number 1, the biggest, is income tax off of people. Number 2, national insurance off of people. Number 3, VAT off of what people spend. So 3 of the top 4 categories are directly from you and me. Okay, here we go. So what do they then do with our money? So the number 1 expenditure is social security. Various things to help out people that are less well off than others. But that is 1/3 of the entire tax take. That's 250 billion out of, well, it's more than 1/3, out of 730 billion. The next cost, staff costs, 253 billion. And if you look back over the last 5 years, staff costs have gone from 190 billion in 2016-17 through to 253 billion. So the extra cost is 63 billion on 190 as a base. That's an extra 33%. Have you noticed services from these wonderful people to be getting better? Because I'm sure they're all trying their hardest in their various ways. But has the waiting time on the government helplines reduced by 33%? Are you getting 33% 30% more value from money from your HMRC helpline? Are waiting times at the hospitals going down by 33%? No, they're going the other way. I'm not blaming individuals within those services. I'm just saying, boof, there's 1/3 extra money and all the services are getting worse. Anti-money laundering. In order to save £1 of laundered money, do you know how much this wonderful government of ours is spending? Is it 30 pence? Is it 50 pence? God forbid it be £1. The actual figure is £100. Why is that okay? It's okay because we let them do it. How long are we going to let them do it for? They're running a Ponzi scheme. They're spending 40, 50, 60% a year more than they're earning. They're not earning anything. You could argue they're just taking it off us. If that doesn't fit the definition of a Ponzi scheme, I don't know what does. How are they paying their staff? Well, it said in the definition of a Ponzi scheme, they pay this person over here with other people's money. Well, if tax receipts aren't other people's money, what is it? Any money the government spends by definition is Ponzi money. But it gets super Ponzi when they're spending more than they're collecting. Did you know that income tax was introduced as a temporary measure during the Napoleonic Wars more than 200 years ago? The government of the United Kingdom introduced income tax as a temporary measure to support the Napoleonic Wars. 200 years later, it's still a temporary measure. Under this video, there's a link and it's called your wealth appraisal. There are 6 different dimensions to wealth. Click on the link below, do your wealth appraisal, and what you'll get is a mark out of 100 in 6 different areas with solid action plans, points, learnings from books like this to take you to your next stage of your wealth creation and protection journey. Okay, this one's a bit of a laugh. On the balance sheet of UK PLC, we've got 2.2 trillion of assets. Now, okay, property, plant, equipment, fine. You could argue in theory they could sell that and that's 1.2 trillion. To give you an example of some of their other financial assets, do you know they've got student loans in there? Do you know they are forecasting in this report that student loans are going to go to 500 billion? This same report says 50% of those will never be repaid. Legally, you cannot do this. It's called an impairment charge. You put this into a PLC, you put this into a private company, you'll get shredded by the auditors. You'll get shredded by your investors. You can't do it. Why do they get away with it? Because we let them. Because the numbers are so big, most people can't even understand it. I spent most of my time, by the way, there's more than 250 pages in this report. I read all of them, every single page. And most of the time, I was shaking my head. I was just, they've done what? How can you, as an individual, compensate for that? How can you make sure you're okay? I firmly believe, and this is part of why I say it, that none of us can control what the world does to us. You can control only what you do to the world. Now, what I did to the world in 2021 is I moved to Monaco. That's pretty extreme, but it's still possible. If you want to take control of your life, my suggestion to most of you sitting out there watching this, give yourself choices. And that number one choice about where you live in the world is very often determined by what passports you hold. So the key choice that I made that allowed me to move here to Monaco in 2021 was I took advantage of the rule that said because my mother was Irish, I could have an Irish passport. I hold a British passport and I hold an EU passport. That gives me huge amounts of choices. And ultimately, if you want that territorial choice, you're going to need one or more extra passports. So you might want to put that on your list. Number 2, I don't believe that any of us can save our way to financial prosperity, to financial independence, whatever you want to call it. But we can all earn extra money. And ideally, if you can make that extra money independent of your home government, wherever that is. So have multiple income streams, but have one or more of those other income streams in another jurisdiction. You can set up internet-based businesses in most countries in many countries in the world. Number 3, acquire assets that governments find it difficult to control. Physical gold, cryptocurrency, that kind of stuff. I think if you focus on those 3 things, you are going to have a lot more independence than you otherwise will. Thank you for listening. I'm really interested in your feedback on this one, especially if you're a politician. You want to debate this with me, Rishi? Kia? Anyone? Are any of you politicians interested in taking me up on my 50% challenge? I can cut the expenditure of UK PLC by 50% and I need 2 years to do it. I can do that. Put me to the test. Okay, you've been wonderful, even if you're a politician, because even if you're a politician, you have the potential to shine. Embrace that potential. You've been wonderful. I've been Paul. See you next time.